Fiction is more interesting than any other form of literature to those of us who like to study people is that in fiction, the author can really tell the truth without hurting anyone and without humiliating himself too much. He can reveal what he has learned through observation and experience of the inner workings of the souls of men. In an autobiography, this is hard to do, try as you will. The more honest you are about yourself and others, however, the more valuable what you have written will be in the future, as a picture of the people and their problems during the period covered by the autobiography. Every individual, as he goes through life, has different problems and reacts differently to the same circumstances. Different individuals see and feel the same things in different ways. Something in them colors the world and their lives. Their experiences and their lessons will be different in each individual case. To me, who dreamed so much as a child, who made a dream world in which I was the heroine of an unending story, the lives of the people around me have continued to have a certain storybook quality. I learned something which has stood me in good stead many times. The most important thing in any relationship is not what you get, but what you give. My Hall family were typical, I think, of the early 1900s. Somewhere in the background there were people who had worked with their hands and with their heads and worked hard, but the need was no longer there, and at that time the material conditions of life seemed stable. My grandfather Hall typified the group in his generation that had reached a goal. He was a gentleman of leisure and enjoyed using his brains. He liked to have the stimulation of intelligent companionship, but he did not feel the need to work. In his children, many of the qualities of the hard-fisted, hard-headed ancestors had faded away, but their world was not so stable as they thought, and their money began to slip through their fingers. Today, 2 generations later, the world has changed so much that many of the younger members of the family have to begin again at scratch. And it is interesting to see that, with necessity, many of them develop the same abilities that existed in the working forebears. This cycle, which I have watched in my family, is one reason why, in our country, it always amuses me when any one group of people take it for granted that, because they have been privileged for a generation or two, they are set apart in any way from the man or woman who is working in order to keep the wolf from the door. It is only luck and a little temporary veneer, and before long the wheels may turn and one and all must fall back on whatever basic quality they have. This idea would never have occurred to my grandmother, for to her the world seemed more or less permanently fixed. But to us today it is a mere platitude, and our children and grandchildren accept it without turning a hair. On the other side of my family, of course, many people whom I have mentioned will be described far better and more fully by other people, except in the case of my father, whose short and happy early life was so tragically ended. With him I have a curious feeling that as long as he remains to me the vivid living person that he is, he will, after the manner of the people in The Bluebird, be alive and continue to exert his influence, which was always a gentle, kindly one. The more the world speeds up, the more it seems necessary that we should learn to pick out of the past the things that we feel were important and beautiful then. One of these things was a quality of tranquility in people, which you rarely meet today. Perhaps one must have certain periods of life lived in more or less tranquil surroundings in order to attain that particular quality. I read not long ago in David Grayson's The Countryman's Year these words: "Back of tranquility lies always conquered unhappiness." That may be so, but perhaps these grandparents of ours found it a little easier to conquer unhappiness because their lives were not lived at high tension so constantly. Certainly, all of us must conquer some unhappiness in our lives. Autobiographies are, after all, useful only as the lives you read about and analyze may suggest to you something that you may find useful in your own journey.